Welcome to Exception Handlers, the podcast where CTOs debug the challenges that keep us up at night. I'm Alex.
And I'm Bill, and we're here to deep dive into the runtime errors facing technology leaders today. Those real-world problems that only surface when our systems meet the complexity of actual operations.
This podcast is brought to you by the LA CTO Forum, a professional organization of technology executives in Southern California and beyond. The forum regularly invites speakers to talk to members about topics CTOs care about, and one of those speakers is a guest on today's podcast.
That's right. We're honored to have Mahesh Guruswamy, CTO, executive coach, and author of a new book called How to Deliver Bad News and Get Away with It. Welcome to the show, Mahesh.
Happy to be here.
So, to begin, we'd just love to get into a bit about your background and what motivated you to write this book.
So maybe like 10-second overview of my background. So I've been in this industry for about 27 years. First 10 years, I was an IC. I was a software developer, engineer, kind of climbed the ranks. Last 10 has been in management leadership roles. In the last 5, I've been in executive roles. And the simplest reason why I wrote this book is because I was so bad at it. So 10 years ago, when I first started managing people, I found it very hard to give people critical feedback, give people like tough news, stakeholders like tough information. I think it's a personality quirk. I'm a people pleaser. I don't want conflict. Nobody wants conflict. So humans are wired to like not have conflict. But over the years, in the initial years, I realized that that's just the wrong thing to do, right? You're responsible for delivering good news, bad news, like all of the things in the middle. So what I would do is, after a tough conversation, I would go back home and reflect on it. And my way of reflecting on it is by writing things down. So I would write down, I had this conversation with this employee, this went well, this did not go well, and this is how I would do better next time around. And those eventually became a set of essays that I would hand out to my team, to my managers, to the directors and VPs who would report to me. And 2 years ago, when I looked at the number of essays I'd written, I was like, oh, this is enough for a book here. And I did some light shopping around with like people I know in my network to say, hey, would you like pay money to read something like this? And they're like, yeah, you should totally write it. And that became the book.
That's excellent. I guess also just to follow up on that, what is the primary audience for this book, do you think?
I think, anybody who's managing people, I would say, are the audience for this. If you want to zero in even more, if you're a newish manager, if you've been managing people for a few years, or you just started to manage people, or even like thinking about managing people, I think it is a great book. A bunch of like VPs and executives have also read the book, and their feedback was, "This is great. I've learned some new things from your book." So I wouldn't discount that cohort of professionals, but by and large, this is mostly targeted at early career managers, is what I would say.
So along those lines, since you've been across a number of different organizations, do you see like the different tools being more effective at different organizations, or being better received at different organizations? Or, what's the element of taking the generality of what you're doing and applying it to an organization? And what's it look like for maybe like testing the waters to see which way you should go before you dump headlong into one of these techniques?
I think the techniques that I have outlined in the book largely remain the same, because my experience is across enterprise companies, B2C companies, B2B, B2 SMBs. So it's been like throughout the spectrum, and the techniques, what I would say, largely remain the same. What I've noticed is the feedback loops are shorter in smaller companies, especially founder-led companies. You say something, and then 30 seconds later, you immediately hear back, like, what is the impact of what you said, right? Yeah. In larger companies, the feedback loop is much longer. You'll find out 6 months later, oh, you messed this thing up, or people didn't like what you said, etc. So that's the only thing that I've kind of noticed in my experience. Which is why, if it's a larger company and I have to like manage a tough situation or a tough conversation, I put in extra effort to find out the aftermath of that. So I would talk to the people who got the feedback after the meeting, people who are in the room, I get their feedback, and my boss, I ask them for feedback. But in larger companies, people are careful about what they say, because they don't know where they stand in the organization. They don't know how well they'll be looked at by their CEO, etc. But in smaller companies, that does not matter, especially if it's a founder-led company. You just immediately hear back, what the impact is.
Yeah, that makes total sense. All right, so let's move on to the next topic. Can you share with us your take on leadership responsibility?
I think so. I've talked, I have thought about it, for the last 10 years or so, and I've talked about it in many talks. I think if I boil it down to, and I want to like restrict my answer to leadership in tech in corporate America,
Yes.
because I don't have any experience outside of tech. I don't have any experience outside the US. So if you're a leader in tech and you're responsible for people in corporate America, your primary job is an efficient capital allocator. That's what I would say is your core responsibility. So just to like translate it for the audience, let's say you're a people manager managing like 10 people. Each person costs like $100,000. I'm just making this number. It's much higher if you're managing engineering teams. $100,000 a year, so multiply by 10, you're responsible for $1 million worth of capital that has been entrusted to you. And you're now responsible for deploying that capital in a way that at the end of the first year, second year, third year, it is 2x, 3x, 4x, 5x. And that's, I encourage people to think about it that way, especially leaders, because oftentimes like leaders think about motivating people and delivering value and delivering through their teams and managing up, managing sideways. All that is true. But the core responsibilities, are you allocating your capital efficiently? And that's how your boss is going to look at you. That's how the board's going to look at leaders, and just the reality of corporate America. So I would say like that's your core responsibility.
Yeah, which makes total sense, although it is unusual to think about it that way at first.
That's right. That's right.
But along those lines, that kind of introduces, I think, a different set of dials and gauges to pay attention to as to when do you intervene?
Yeah, exactly. So if I think about different departments have different situations where you have to like intervene. But let's take the simplest case, because we're all like in the like CTOs, VPEs like world, right? So if you think about it that way, the if I look at the key metric that engineering leaders are going to be sort of calibrated against or measured against is efficiency, like velocity. Like how quickly can you take an idea to production and getting value from customers? And there's many ways of measuring like engineering productivity or team efficiency. There's like space metrics, there's like DORA metrics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think they're all not super useful, because you can't present DORA metrics to the board, right? Like you go, it's like, hey, here's like space metrics. They're like, I don't understand what you're talking about. So I encourage teams to anchor on how quickly can you get stuff into production. So track like cycle times, or track release velocity, or track like how quickly you ship features. And I think like if you look at that, then that's what I would say is the kind of the core thing that engineering leaders like need to look at. And if that starts to slip, that's when you intervene. So if your project is delayed, you intervene. If anything that upsets that balance, upsets sort of the train per se, is that's when you intervene. So people problems, project delays, stakeholder problems, anything that can derail your velocities, when you should intervene.
That makes sense. But when you're doing the intervention, and I guess there's a lot of different dimensions to this, but you clearly the basic ways to do it are written and verbal. And there's also the in-person, we need to sit down and talk for some, I guess, really critical things. Do you have kind of general rules of thumb that you use for like, okay, I'm going to start with verbal, or I'm going to hit the written, or do I always do it so I have a document base to work from, or how do you generally prescribe it?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of what I call rhythm of the business meetings. So if I look at another way of describing what leaders should do, as I mentioned, like being an efficient capital allocator, another way of describing the same thing in a much more like simplistic manner is, are the right people working on the right things at the right pace? So as long as you're able to like measure all three of those dimensions and have eyes on it, then you can like sort of suss this out very quickly. So what I mean by that is, so you have a talent review for measure, like looking at people's effectiveness. You have business reviews for looking at how like programs are doing, what their status is, what are their risks, etc. Specifically to your question, I like weekly business reviews where the different teams present like where they stand, how are their projects doing, what are the risks, what are their leadership asks, etc. And that's where I kind of poke into the details. So for example, if something is yellow, then I would dig into that and say, what does it mean? Like, can this be green? Like, what is the issue? And if it's red, like, what are you all doing to like turn it back to green, etc. And if the teams are responding to my poking and prodding in a positive way, then I just let them go. It's like next business review, things are fine. But if the next business review is again yellow or red or whatever, then that calls for a much smaller but more focused meeting on that specific topic. So I'd pull the PM, EM combination tech leads together into a smaller meeting and say, hey, what is going on here? And usually that's when like things start to resolve. And that's when they'll say, you know what, we need your help with this, or we need to like cut scope, but we don't have, we're finding it hard to make a decision. Then I'll go in and say, you know what, just make this call. And if things persist, in a persist, as in like they refuse to change for the better, then you sort of raise the temperature, right? Okay, leader, this is unacceptable. What are you doing? You know, get this back on track, etc. 90% of the time, like people like, you know, figure things out. And at the 10%, it's a much tougher conversation. Like, it looks like it's not a fit for what we're trying to do, and maybe we'll find a different role or different team for you, or sometimes like just outside the company too.
Right.
So actually, just picking up on what you just said, I think maybe let's get to the meat of your book, which is how do you actually deliver bad news to people? And I think the place to start is with employees.
Yeah.
What is your process to tell an employee bad news?
So the precursor is are you able to detect when employees are having problems, right? Which is why I'm a big fan of talent reviews. Just for your audience, the talent review, I hold it every month with all the people leaders in my org, and everybody walks through the edges of the organization. So edges means who's not working well, working out well, and who's working really well. And we talk about the plans for both those cohorts of employees. And and then the people in the middle, if I hear the word average, then my ears perk up. It's like, okay, no, we don't want any average people in a team. So when you say this person is average, like, what do you mean? And usually that helps me get a sense of where people are at and who needs help. So that's like, you need to be able to like detect that something is going wrong. So I talk to stakeholders all the time. I talk to peer leaders all the time. And they'll like tell me, hey, there's something brewing here. You got to go check it out. My first conversation is almost always exploratory. So it's like, hey, what's going on? This project got delayed a couple of times, or this conflict is unresolved. Like, what is going on? And usually it's a sort of low temperature, casual conversation, because you want the other person to open up. You don't want the other person to sort of climb up, right? Because, they might have personal issues. They might have like issues at home. They might have like health issues. They might be going through a tough time. I had like one employee who was going through a divorce and didn't want to share it with anybody else, but his like work was slipping. And then I had to like sort of dig it out of him and say, okay, you gotta like tell me some of these things so that I know what you're going through, so we can like accommodate those. So chances are like this person is going through a few things and needs time and space, etc. So that, that's why the first conversation is almost always like a low casual conversation. The next conversation is like slightly higher. I kind of write in the book, I talk about like raising the temperature slowly. So like leaders, like, I feel like leaders fall into two categories. Either they don't raise the temperature at all, or raise the temperature very quickly. So my encouragement to leaders is get into the habit of raising the temperature slowly, but be comfortable raising the temperature when you're not seeing the change you want this other person to bring about. The first conversation is low stress, low key. Next conversation is slightly stronger. Hey, things are not improving. This is what I want you to do. This is my expectations. And if things don't improve, then it's a tougher conversation. And this is like before I put somebody on a PIP. I dislike PIPs completely, because it is just most of the time is like wasting everybody's time. Because most leaders, I would say, are very bad at managing conflicts from the perspective of maintaining trust between the employee and the manager. By the time you get to a PIP, chances are the trust is already gone. So even if the employee comes out of a PIP, I don't know how the two of them can work together. There are a few managers who do it really well, who can like preserve the trust even after going through a PIP, which is why like before I put somebody on a PIP, I give them the out. It's like, hey, to me, it doesn't look like it's going to work out. So do you want to just take some money and leave on your own terms? It's like a few months, and you can craft your own message to your team, and you can leave on good terms, and we don't have to like position it as a termination. You just say you're like exploring new opportunities. And I do it almost all the time for leaders who report to me, because it's always going to be a shock to the system when you let an engineering manager go, or a director of engineering, or a VP go. So for them, I make an exception and say, okay, not an exception, but I give them, I kind of push on that offer quite a bit. It's like, okay, take the 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and then leave. And then most of the time they take it. So everybody leaves like somewhat peacefully and somewhat happily.
I'm just curious, in those situations where they don't take the offer, what's some of the reasoning behind that? Like, what do you think is going on in their head?
I think almost always the reasoning behind their head is sort of personal situation. Is what my take is. In large companies, it's slightly different. Their reasoning might be, I get out of the PIP, I can go somewhere else. So, and if they tell that to me explicitly, then I'll make it happen, right? So okay, clearly you don't want to work with me anymore, which is okay, it's like, it happens. So, and then if that's the end goal, then I'll be like, okay, let's go through the PIP. And if you come out successfully, I'll make sure that you land in another team successfully. I'll talk to the manager to make sure like there's no, this employee is set up for success. Because in the end, I don't root for anybody to fail. Like personally, professionally, like I don't want anybody to fail. I don't want anybody to be in a tough situation. I don't want anybody to feel like they are trapped in a corner, right? Because oftentimes you put people on a PIP, they're like, I'm trapped here. I don't know where this is going to go. I feel like I'm just going to not survive this, which is why I give them the out before. It's like, hey, here's an out. So I think that's my hypothesis is like personal situation. I completely understand and respect that, because it's tough out there, right? It's people's situations are people's situations. And if they are open with me and share that piece of information with me, then that's totally fine. Oftentimes I also go the extra mile, especially if they're left on good terms with me. I find like new jobs for them too. Like I introduce them to other hiring managers and say, hey, they're not a good fit here for these reasons, but for what you're trying to do, they might be a really, really good fit. So you should like consider talking to them. And I will always give a positive reference to anybody that I work with, even if I had let them go. There's like, I don't know, 0.1% of people that I won't. But because, either they have committed some kind of HR violation, so I don't feel comfortable like recommending them, or they left on like really bad terms. It made it difficult for me, made it difficult for my team, made it difficult for the company. Then I'm like, okay, I can recommend you in good consciousness. But most of the time, I give positive recommendations to anybody who I let go to.
So just like in life, good breakups are important.
Yeah. Life is, and again, I tell people this, and maybe it's not true anymore, but tech is a very small community, especially in the leadership circle. I'm like, there are very few of us, regardless of how the outside world looks at us. If you look at directors, VPs, there are very small number of people who are in those roles. So, if I let a VP go, there is like a non-trivial chance that I might end up working for that person, right? You never know, right? So, which is why like I don't believe in convincing myself to like dislike the person or hate the person, or or like, oh, this person just completely sucks. They shouldn't be working anywhere. Like I don't have any of those feelings in me, because it's just and I've been in those situations too. Like I haven't, in I guess like 10 years ago or even before that, there've been like roles that it didn't work out for me, and I get it, right? Like it's not everybody's going to be fit for every role.
Makes perfect sense. Now I get to the part where my inner Dilbert starts to tremble.
Sure.
And that is, how do you deliver bad news to customers?
Oh, yeah. So a fun fact. So I mentioned Dilbert in a team meeting with I think it was predominantly Gen Zs and maybe some millennials. Nobody knew who Dilbert was.
Wow.
Oh.
So that's when I knew I was getting old.
Yeah.
Right? And nobody
Times
knew what
changed.
Dilbert was or is. And it's still an active strip, right? It's not dead yet.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
One more thing, and I'll like answer your question. The other thing I mentioned in the meeting was a Rolodeck. And people did not know what that was either. Anyway.
You didn't get around to asking them if they could look for it in the yellow pages?
So the context of the Rolodeck conversation was people were talking about like salespeople, and I said, well, most of the time like sales leaders are hired for their Rolodecks. And people are like, what the hell is a Rolodeck? I was like, oh my God. I'm like, oh. Anyway, so to customers, what I have noticed is, this might be limited to the type of customers I've been exposed to, but most customers are very quick to be angered, but very quick to forgive too. So you gotta like get past the initial anger they'll throw at you, and kind of push yourself to engage with them. And most of the time, it's a combination of transparency. They want to know what is going on. They want the details, even if they don't understand it, they want to understand why did your email server go down. And it doesn't matter if they understand it or not. Like you have to explain it to them. And as long as you're giving them the details, taking accountability for it, and I put my name on all of the incidents when stuff happens. I tell customers, you can reach out to me directly. Here's my email address. And some people do, and most don't. But they want to see somebody taking accountability from the company. And if an engineer or engineering manager does that, sometimes it doesn't work because they're like, where's the executive? Like, we want to hang that person. I was like, okay, yeah, here I am. Right? So I think transparency, accountability, making yourself available for answering questions. And then the last piece is, be comfortable, putting some money into the equation too, right? Giving them a free few months of subscription off or discounts, or in some cases, we have also given them like part of the revenue that they lost because of outages in our system. We have done that too. But what I've noticed is the person who is yelling at you on social media, the minute they got on a call with you, they calm down.
Right.
It's very hard to yell at somebody in person. I mean, I've met those people too. But most of the time, there's like, you don't know what you're doing. I've been building systems for 20 years. This is unacceptable. You get on a call with that person and they're like, oh, yeah, I get it. Okay, this is what happens. I was like, okay.
Yeah, I'm being heard.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly, you put it in a much better way. Yeah, they want to be heard. And so usually when there's a big outage or a big incident and everybody's complaining, myself, the rest of the executive team, we go on like a marketing, not marketing, like Q&A session. Like we will go answer every question on social media. We would like invite them to get on a call with us. And almost always that resolves the situation.
And do you find yourself, I guess, what's the relationship with sales when you're doing something like that? Like in my experience, the sales guy's always like, I'll handle it. Just tell me what to tell them because they're afraid I'm going to say something or one of my team will say something.
Right.
But what's been your experience with working with the sales teams, particularly when you mention things like, giving them rebates or discussing backs and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, early on, the salespeople are like a little bit hesitant to like put me on the call with customers because they're like, this engineering dude, I don't know what he's going to say, right? But over the years, I'm now able to convince them to put me on the call with the customer because I understand the business, I can talk their language, and this is also something that is important for executives to learn, especially like engineering executives, because we're so focused on the zeros and ones that we kind of forget about the other parts of the business. So. But one of the things I do when I onboard into any new company is understand the sales motion, the go-to-market motion. I'll talk to some of the customers. I've talked to some of the top salespeople, just so that I get the lay of the line and I can like talk the same language. And when they see you in action with customers, then they'll be like, okay, this guy can handle himself. And in terms of the like rebates and discounts, this is something, because I'm in an executive role, I can make those decisions. So that's why they like including me in those calls, because I can just make the decision on the call when somebody says, or like if somebody's asking for too much, then I can sidebar with the salesperson and just make the decision between ourselves without like needing to escalate it, etc. So I think as long as you can carry yourself in a customer conversation, I don't think salespeople will have a problem including you in any situation.
So part of that I'm hearing is there's probably a good practice is to spend some time with the sales guys, talking with them about that inevitable situation and getting them to be familiar with what you know.
For sure. And in some cases, when I have to go tell a customer, like a specifically, bad news or whatever, I also like talk to the customer support team that supports them, account executive, like all those folks to support this this customer, this account. I go and find out like what is their day to day, how is this going to be affected, who are the friendlies, who are not the friendlies.
Yeah.
So you understand all of that, and then you get on a call, then they'll be like much more prepared to like have that discussion with the customers, right? So
Yeah. To that exact point, I was just thinking, are there any particular red flags that you hear or see coming into those kind of conversations where you kind of, prepare for the worst?
well, I think if the customer is particularly upset and they're at risk of like churn, then that's a very tricky situation to try to go and manage. And almost always the customer won't make a decision on the call, right? So it depends on how they feel after. So if you show up and you're transparent, you're taking accountability, and you give them rebates, discounts, whatever you can, then chances are 50-50, right? They might stay, they might leave. What I don't say, I very sparingly use this line, is I'll do whatever you want.
Yes.
So chances are you might not be able to do what they want, right? So which is why I don't use that line anymore. Earlier, when I was a youngin, I used to use that, and it was terrible, right? Because I would say that, and then my boss would be like, "You can't do it. So why did you promise this?" Right? So which is why, like as an executive, I don't use that line anymore. I don't say, "Yeah, I'll do whatever you want," right? So it's just because it's just probably going to be a lie.
Right.
Well, and so that brings us to the final boss, if you will, your boss.
Final boss.
And delivering the bad news to your boss, who may even be the CEO of the company.
Yeah.
So I guess, what is the secret to not getting fired in that situation?
Well, I think I'll position it in a slightly different way. I think the secret is to be comfortable in that situation getting fired, is the way I would position it,
Sure.
right? Because leaders are hired, like especially CEOs and executives are hired for their specific skills, for their specific things that made them successful, right? And if the feedback you're giving goes against the grain of what made them successful, chances are they're not going to react positively to that. For example, if the CEO is a cost-cutting CEO, and the board hired that person to cut costs, if you go and say anything that is against that core kind of ethos that makes them who they are, they're not going to listen to you, right? So one of the and this is not regardless of like if you're delivering bad news to the CEO or not. Any new job that I take, I mentally prepare myself to, okay, if I get fired, what is the worst thing that could happen, right? So any job that I take, I don't have any illusions of staying in the job forever, because I could get fired anytime. Everybody's dispensable, right? So that's like, I would answer it that way. Is like, just get comfortable being let go, because executive seats are tough to like hold on to, right? And then like understand what your CEO's ethos is, right? If they're wired a certain way, you can't like change that. In very rare situations, I've seen CEOs change when there's enough feedback coming at them from everyone. Like if the executive team is saying the same thing, the employees are saying the same thing, then they might change their approach in a little bit. But most CEOs don't, right? So you just have to figure out like whether you're comfortable with that equation or not. And I also see the reason why, because you don't want the CEO to be infinitely pliable, right? Because then you're not going to get the same result that you're expecting to get by hiring that CEO in the first place. So I can see why CEOs behave that way. And especially founders, they're not going to change. So they are who they are, and there are certain things that they do that made them successful, and you just have to figure out whether you're going to be comfortable with that or not. I do encourage giving CEOs micro bits of feedback and see how they react to it. Then you'll quickly find out where they stand. You can say, hey, this meeting was a little tense. Can we talk about it? Or this strategy might not work. What do you think about it? And you'll find out like whether they're open to the conversation or not, right?
Yeah,
and if they're not, then you have to decide whether you can sit with that equation or not. Can you put it in a box and be effective? Although I would not recommend putting anything in a box, because the thing in the box eventually grows, and then you got to like deal with that at some point. But if you can put it in a box and survive, then great. But if you can't, then you got to figure out like what type of working relationship works for you.
So I guess maybe just following up on that, given that most CEOs or executives probably won't change their behavior, why even bother with giving them bad news or negative feedback?
I think there were a few things. Like one is if you don't give feedback, then you kind of are diminishing yourself as an executive, right? Because executives are supposed to give feedback, and that's why they're hired. So if you're in a room and you don't like speak up because you're worried about what the room will think about you, then even if the CEO might not like your feedback, I'm sure they're thinking, well, he's an executive. Why did he not speak up if he has like strong points of views on it? So because oftentimes like the feedback could be valuable for others in the room and not just the CEO. So as in general, like executives should be comfortable giving feedback. And then the other piece is I think it's good for your soul. If you like just keep things inside, it'll find its way out somewhere, somehow, right? It might like come out on your personal side, on your personal front, right? So it's best to let people know where they stand, so that, and then invite them to be the same with you, so that you know where you stand with them. And I've worked with CEOs who are extremely hard charging, who have extremely like strong points of views. And I was able to work with them, even if they don't take my feedback, they're like, but I want you around because they want to hear that feedback from me. Right. So, it's just like good practice, to just give feedback in general.
Yeah. Well, I think on that note, this was a really wonderful discussion, Mahesh. Really, thank you so much for coming. I should also mention that your book, How to Deliver Bad News and Get Away with It, covers many other topics we did not get into in this conversation, but are really great. I read it, highly recommend it. It was very enjoyable and easy read. So thank you for coming.
Well, thanks for reading the book, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, if you found the topics covered in this interview relevant, LA CTO Forum has lots of opportunities to engage with other CTOs about topics just like this one. If you're interested in learning more, find us on LinkedIn or on the web at lactoforum.org. Until next time, may your deployments be smooth and your tech debt manageable.
And remember, if you can't handle the exception, at least log it properly. We'll catch you next time.